Okay. Got it, everybody? if you see it. Welcome, everybody. I know we are expecting more people, but we want to respect everybody's time and start as close to on time as possible. As you can see, we have a great lineup of speakers. If by any chance Crystal does not make it today, Edward is going to cover for her. So we'll have all of our points of view here. But as you all know, this is Expanding Career Options, Part 2, talking about the power and challenges of life science discovery. In Part 1, for those of you that were with us, we did the power and challenges of discovery from 4 perspectives. In space, with Dr. Alvin Smith talking about careers related to planetary research, biological and environmental hazards of taking people and objects to and from space. We talked about the challenge for space, where David Johnson, who's an architect, talked about the need for the right laboratory and office space to create that environment for innovation and for discovery. And then we had keeping us safe on Earth, careers in quality assurance, quality control, regulation, and the alphabet soup of agencies such as CDC, FDA, and so on, thanks to Karina Rodriguez. And from one of our very successful former BioFlex pre-apprentices, we had discovery to keep our crops and our climate safer using insect pheromones instead of insecticides. So today we're going to face the huge challenge that COVID-19 brought us over 2 years ago and is still bringing us, unfortunately. But we have very, very qualified speakers from 4 different aspects. We're going to talk about research and development that was put into practice with Dr. Christopher Bousset. We're going to talk about the manufacturing of therapeutics and how that was impacted by COVID with Dr. Christopher Martin. We're going to talk about patient care in 2 different aspects. One, the direct care with Edward Nazareth of Torrance Memorial Medical Center. And then if Crystal makes it, and if not, Edward will cover, we'll talk about the huge move to telemedicine and how COVID-19 impacted that. So without further ado, I'm going to just quickly outline our agenda. We're going to have the speakers do an introduction. That would be, obviously we've given your name, but your current role, what your company or organization does, your top challenge with COVID in mind, and maybe even the positions that they had to face these challenges and opportunities the most. From there, and we'll go person by person, and from there, we'll talk about the career pathways that you see related to what's growing in your industry and how COVID-19 may have affected these careers. And then we'll come back to each one of you again and talk about your personal career pathway. The role of maybe finding a mentor, education, organizations students might consider joining or following. So we do have our handy dandy time gadget that will give you an idea of how far we have. We're asking each of our panelists to keep, the first part is about 3 to 4 minutes each. And then I'll remind you as we go along. And then just for a little housekeeping, we are going to do a couple of polls to keep everybody engaged. So be ready to respond to the polls. And then everybody has the chat. If you have questions as we're going along, we found it most effective to put your questions right in the chat. We'll try to take them if they make sense right then and there, we'll take them right then and there, or we'll try to do questions and answers at the end. The students that are in our current cohort, please make sure you stay on after we close so that we can give you your final instructions. So without further ado, let's start meeting our panelists. And our panelists, would you put your cameras on as you are talking, or you can have them on the whole time if you would like. And we will start with our first Christopher Bousset. Would you tell us a little bit about yourself, your company, your top challenge given COVID, and how your company faced this challenge and opportunity?
I love to. Thanks for having me. So I'm Chris. I'm, as you can hear from my accent, I'm actually Swiss by origin. But I'm here in California because this is the place to do research in the world and to try new stuff. I am a PhD. I have a background in virology and electron microscopy. That is my scientific background, and I run the imaging core at the Crest Institute of Science, which is a non-profit in biomedical and chemistry research. So we're largely federally funded by the NIH. There we go with the acronyms and the letter salad. And we do infectious disease research, implants, and similar things. But on the side, I also run the startup incubator at Crest. So we're providing technology and know-how to early stage companies and help them develop their product or their ideas into products, which is a very, very interesting field to be in. In terms of COVID challenges, since we are in a way a 20-year-old, 24-year-old startup now, we actually took COVID by the horns and used our capabilities to implement a testing protocol. So we've actually been testing all our employees since March 2020, so now 2 years, 2 or 3 times a week, depending on the number of cases. We've been testing 2 to 3 times a week, everyone for COVID to maintain a safe workplace environment. So the challenge for us was actually the opposite of what most people had. We were working full speed ahead. We had no breaks, no downtime. We picked up other people's work who couldn't be in the lab. And it was a challenge from a different perspective, that simply finding out that while we have the tools to test very effectively, very, very precisely for a virus like COVID, the tools were inadequate to provide that quickly and effectively to everyone. And challenges, yes, absolutely, took an enormous amount of resources to do that, but benefits as well, in the sense that really is, as the scientific community, we've developed so much knowledge and instrumentation and new assays, new tools because of COVID. And we've learned to collaborate in ways we didn't do before. That COVID actually has had its upsides for the scientific community. It's been a very interesting time in scientific research, how quickly the community came together and managed to address this crisis, right? We've never developed a vaccine at this pace ever in all of history. So it's pretty impressive what we put together. And I see a lot of growth there because, believe it or not, this will not be the last pandemic. We're going to face another one sooner or later. It's just a matter of time. So the better we are prepared and the more we invest in developing those technologies, the better off we will be. And there we go.
Yeah.
That's my part.
Well, and you've got a great segue there, Chris, because you're talking about staying ready, staying nimble, developing, and then we go right into manufacturing. So Chris Martin, how did COVID affect Bachem America? And tell us obviously a little bit about the company. We'll get the career part later, but go right ahead.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Chris Martin. As you can tell by my accent, I'm not Swiss, but close by. I'm German, and I work for Bachem Americas. This is the American subsidiary of a Swiss pharmaceutical manufacturing company. So what we actually do, we manufacture the active ingredients which are found in many pharmaceuticals, or as we also call them, drugs. We don't sell them under our name, but we sell them then to pharmaceutical companies who then manufacture pills, injections, or vaccines out of the products that we make. So our big challenge during the pandemic, similar as Chris already mentioned, is to stay fully operational during the pandemic. And this was obviously important because we are considered as critical infrastructure. The products that we manufacture, the drugs, are important for the well-being of thousands of patients, tens of thousands of patients worldwide. So closing down simply was not an option. Very similar to what Chris described, we did it by vigorous testing, social distancing, having employees who did not have to work in the lab work from home. But working in the pharmaceutical industry, we had a large head start over most of other companies because we already have all of the PPE. And now 2 years in, everybody knows that what PPE stands for personal protective equipment. So the face masks, the goggles, the face shields, gloves. This is something we already routinely use. Of course, all our laboratories from the beginning were set up to minimize any chemical or biohazard to our employees, as you can see in some of the pictures behind me. So this was one of the main challenges, which is basically an indirect COVID challenge. One way we directly contributed to COVID is by providing then these pharmaceutical substances for clinical trials to be used directly as COVID therapeutics. Very early on in the pandemic, we learned that COVID is a pulmonary disease which affects the lungs. So quite a few of the products that we manufacture are actually for pulmonary diseases. So there was a large number of clinical studies started with the products that we manufacture for pulmonary diseases. Then a few weeks or months later, we also got the information that another response to COVID is due to an overreaction of the patient's immune systems. So a few substances that we manufacture are what we call immunomodulators. So they have the possibility to modulate the patient's immune response. So again, clinical trials were started with these substances. And the big challenge then for us was, of course, to, within a very short time frame, manufacture these pharmaceuticals so that they could eventually then be used in the clinical trials. So these are two ways where we indirectly, by keeping all of our workforce safe and our company operational, and directly by manufacturing pharmaceuticals for the COVID pandemic as therapeutics. These are two ways which we have coped with this pandemic and are still doing since more than 2 years' time.
Okay, I couldn't get my mute off. Thank you, Christopher. I appreciate that. Again, the nimbleness, the ability, taking advantage of the product and the know-how that you already had, moving it, swerving it to these clinical trials and beefing up manufacturing. So two really interesting ways of dealing with COVID. Now let's take you into what most of us are familiar with in the patient care aspect. Edward, would you please do the same? Tell a little bit about you, a little bit about Torrance Memorial Medical Center and how COVID impacted you and what many of us may see obvious and maybe something that was less obvious to an audience like us.
Sure. Again, thank you for allowing me to be part of this panel. It's an honor, and it's just amazing some of the work you guys are doing. I'm hearing some of the students and what they're working on and how they're participating here. So it's an honor to be part of this, and it's great to hear about the wonderful work everyone's doing. So I am a registered nurse by trade. So I work at Torrance Memorial Medical Center, which is a not-for-profit, locally governed medical hospital, basically, and a system actually throughout the West South Bay here. So it's been I've been here about 17 years, and so it's been great working at Torrance Memorial. It's just like I said, it's a community hospital, so really built by the community for the community. And yeah, we experienced COVID like with the communities here, so it was very scary at first. We did not know, as some of our panelists talked about, we didn't really know what to expect. We didn't know what this disease was about. And obviously we'd be the closest at maybe transmitting or getting it as patients approach us and come present with us with the disease. So the strange thing about COVID is actually We were expecting to be really busy at first, but in fact, half our hospital had to shut down because nobody wanted to come in for surgeries or procedures or to see their doctor. So it was weird to be in the middle of a pandemic starting off, and like half the hospital had no work and shut down, while half of the hospital was just bracing themselves in the ICU and the ER and infection prevention departments, sort of just bracing themselves. We did not know what was going to walk in through our doors. So that was kind of interesting. And what I'm really grateful about a place like Torrance Memorial is like we put everybody to work. As you heard from the panelists earlier, you know, some places just couldn't work or couldn't get their employees together. Some hospitals even had layoffs. What we did was we put everything to work. So there was a shortage of some supplies, and some manufacturing areas did close down. And we were grateful for the ones that stayed open and was able to create the supplies and things we needed. But we put the other half of the hospital to work, and they made the mask and the surgical, scrub attire and the face shields and all the PPE, the personal protective equipment we needed, and just supported the rest of our staff while we sort of braced ourselves for different waves of COVID. But that was kind of the interesting aspect, seeing one. I've never had that happen where we just did not know what to expect, and an entire hospital just shut down. Yet we were just sort of bracing ourselves for what will work through the door. But everyone sort of pulled together. And we were all so scared. I mean, we were dressing up in spacesuits, basically trying to protect ourselves. I heard some hospitals, didn't even have PPE, were wearing trash bags. It got pretty crazy those first couple of months. But thanks to, like I said, my colleagues that researched the manufacturing, the people behind the scenes, once we caught up with some of the stuff, we were able to get what we needed, understand the disease a little bit better, obviously develop treatments eventually, and then be able to deliver some of these treatments. So at one point in the wave, so our hospital beds are typically about 300 patients at a time. We were filled to the brim with COVID patients, I've said, around January 2021. I mean, every hallway, every bed, we were in the basement, we were in the lab, we were anywhere we could put a patient. We were just filled to the brim with COVID patients, and obviously, and just other regular patients. So it was so difficult at the time. And then the vaccine came out and treatments got better, and you could just see how much of an improvement it did. We went from just a full hospital to the summer last year to almost no COVID patients in the hospital. So we only have a few right at the moment, which is nice. But yeah, just really interesting to see how the treatments have evolved and how COVID sort of approach has evolved in the hospital. So we're grateful to be part of that and survive it. And now we're just hoping it stays under control.
Great. And I don't think Crystal has made it yet. So could you kind of talk a little bit about the field of telehealth and how Torrance has seen that, kind of a little history, but especially COVID and what you see as the future?
Yeah, definitely. It was already starting out. I was part of the program. I was a stroke program coordinator. And one of the hard things in healthcare is finding enough specialists to take care of you. You definitely see all the specialists in the large academic centers, in the middle of town or downtown, but not as many specialists out in the different communities, say in the South Bay or out in the desert. So telemedicine's always been sort of up and coming. It definitely blew up during COVID. I mean, no one really knew what Zoom was, right, until COVID sort of hit, and then Zoom blew up, and all these platforms for telehealth and virtual sort of meeting. And basically that's what telehealth is. It's as simple as that. It used to be very complicated, very expensive equipment. You have to purchase, thousands of dollars, try to get this two-way communication going. And actually COVID made a lot of that easier, made telehealth so easy where you could just get on your phone and speak to physicians across the nation and see them. And as you know, patients got really scared to come into a hospital or see their doctor. And in fact, we were actually seeing increase in cancer rates, late diagnosis cancer rates the last year and a half, because people just did not want to see their doctor. So we're seeing a lot more, as simple as just FaceTime type of technology just developed at local doctors' offices, and patients can access so quickly. So now you don't have to go into an office. You don't have to wait in line or wait for an appointment. You can tap in the phone and see someone really quickly and get a diagnosis, get prescriptions electronically sent to your pharmacy, pick out your medications, and do a lot of that sort of virtually. I know I'm sure Crystal spent a lot more time in her sort of realm in developing some of that, but yeah, we've definitely been able to take advantage of the growth in telemedicine and just simple things like a FaceTime type of features on your phone where patients can talk to their doctors directly and have that access. So we're very happy we're able to kind of build into that.
Yeah, definitely. You know, we didn't put this into a poll, but if people would go into the reactions button or chat, and I'd like to say, how many of you have ever used telemedicine, have experienced telemedicine? I know I did for the first time during COVID. How many of you, if you just put, you know, go into the reactions button and put your hand up or put it into chat, get a feel for it. I'm seeing a few. Not too many. Okay, there you can't access it, but not too many. But I think it's going to be, as you well said, Edward, that this is part of the future. And what Crystal has done with her company, Kira Medical, is she's developed, like many, a smartphone application, and she is targeting young women, particularly college age. And that's what we'd hope to, we'll have to get her another time. It's very interesting what she's doing. So let's move on to the career pathway portion.
Do we want to do the poll real quick?
I'm sorry, go ahead. Thank you. No, you want me to do that? Let's see.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, get ready and go ahead and do the poll. What the poll is if you can recognize who's who. So taking number one, I'm both a researcher and educator. Who is that? Mark it. Two, same thing. Go through and do that and do it quickly. See how fast you can do it. We only have 3 people, so you don't have to worry about Crystal. I'll give you just a couple of, let's get some more people up there. We've got half the group so far. Let's get the other half. Punch that button. We're getting there. Keep going. Almost there. Okay, give you 5 more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, I'm closing the poll. Good, we got almost everybody. Okay, and I'm going to share the results. Can you see that? Amelia, can you see it?
I can't see it, but can someone else see it? Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so both a researcher and an educator. Who am I? Yes. Well, actually, the 2 Chris's come close, but it's really Dr. Bousser. How do you pronounce it? Bousser or Bousset?
Bousser.
Bousser. I'm totally wrong. Okay, I've only known you for how long now? Bousser. Okay. And my work revolves around manufacturing. Who am I? Well, yes, Christopher Bousser does do some manufacturing, but our big manufacturer would be Chris Martin. And then I help people work directly with patients. We had a very good turnout on that one. Edward Nazareth. Great. Thank you, everybody, for participating. We'll have one more poll later on. Okay, so this time we're going to ask our panelists in 2 to 3 minutes each to share the variety of growing career pathways related to your overall business, particularly focusing on entry-level opportunities and the required skills and experience or education that you see necessary. And this time I'm going to ask Edward Nazareth to start, please.
Sure. I had a photo I wanted to share with
yeah.
kind of, if you have that
Yes,
ability
let
to
me share my
that.
screen.
Sure. So I binge a lot of Netflix and Hulu, so I watch a lot of TV shows. One of the ones I came across with, I don't know if you guys seen it, is The Resident. Yeah, I'm a sucker for kind of medical shows as well too. A lot of these are kind of over dramatized, but I actually like The Resident pretty good. If you have Hulu or Fox, you can catch some shows on if you're ever bored and want to binge watch some medical shows. The Resident's a pretty decent one. It actually deals with a lot of the healthcare issues that are ongoing quite well. Although again, it is a little over dramatized. The guy in the suit there is the CEO of a hospital. You'll never see a CEO push a patient down in a gurney down the ER. But In general, it's actually pretty good. They deal with some of these topics quite well and quite knowledgeably and pretty accurately. But just looking at a photo, you'll see a lot of shows like this that kind of dramatize and glorify some of the medical sort of fields and the different things going on in a hospital and a healthcare setting. But just around this photo, and it's very common to see a bunch of people rushing somebody from maybe from the field out into surgery. But just around the setting, you have with the resident, the main guy in the front is a doctor in basic med school, finished on med school, and as a resident. You have a chief of cardiac surgeon, you have a CEO back there, you have a surgical resident, you have a primary doctor. What I like about the show is on the person on the right, she's a nurse practitioner, so a nurse that's gone back to school and gotten a graduate or doctorate degree, nurse practitioner. But just even around this, there's people who brought the patient, from the field into the hospital. So the EMTs, the paramedics, which are great entry-level positions into the healthcare field. You see blood hanging there, so if you're into that, if you're into like pathology and different things, there's people who work in the blood lab that helps, cross type and cross match the blood. So you got a bank of blood you can rely on and get the patient the right amount of blood. Someone talked about pharmaceuticals. There's some medications hanging in an IV. So there's a pharmacy technician or a pharmacist down in the pharmacy who's setting up the right medications for the patient to hang. This patient might be a trauma victim, so maybe they're rushing to a CT scanner. So there's people who work in imaging technology who do X-rays, MRIs, CT scans. So that's a whole field. You can go in. Those are typically entry-level, associate degree, bachelor's degree positions. And now obviously there's physicians and nurses as well. So just in this one scene, although you can't tell, there's so many different healthcare people touching this patient, from technologists to transporters to nurses to doctors to pharmacists. So that's what's really cool about the healthcare setting. There's so much going on in there. I'm a registered nurse, and that's the path I chose. And just in that, there's so many different fields now. But hopefully that kind of gives you an idea of all the different opportunities that are out there in healthcare that are just growing, since the pandemic. So.
And what would you direct in terms of more entry-level positions?
A lot of the positions I mentioned are so you can go to associate degree school for a lot of those positions, or community college for pharmacy technician or even registered nursing. People who work with surgical technology is definitely an entry-level position where you can get into the field pretty quickly after a program at a community college level. So a lot of technology, imaging technology, a lot of those positions I mentioned were all pretty much at close to entry level. So either post high school or some community college.
Excellent. And I know that with our community colleges, not only do they have excellent programs, but we're also developing apprenticeships around these, so that earn and learn concept around these professions, as well as the biosciences. But great, thank you. I let you go over time because you're speaking for two people at this point. So thank you very much. Let's go to Chris Martin, and same question for you, Chris. The growing careers in manufacturing, related to manufacturing, entry-level opportunities, skills and experience or education, general growth, if you would, please.
Yes, I mean, the pharmaceutical field is such a large field that there's also a vast array of different positions, many of which are entry-level positions. So basically, education-wise, you can get a entry-level position after having done a Ph.D. and a postdoc, or only a Ph.D. in the science field. You can get an entry-level position with a master's degree. You can get an entry-level position with a bachelor's degree as well. And also now, for instance, at Bachem, you can get an entry-level position just with a high school degree as well through our apprenticeship program. So I think what is most important for the career pathways in the pharmaceutical industry, because it is such multidisciplinary fields, there are so many different parts, departments, and skills involved in actually producing pharmaceutical, and it often takes a decade to develop a certain pharmaceutical, that there are many opportunities along the way, not only in the manufacturing on the research part, but also when it comes to the quality control part, to the quality assurance part, to make sure that this pharmaceutical is also safe once it comes to the market. We've heard a lot in the past 2 years about the CDC and the FDA and how they regulate the medical fields, so that basically any science background, any science degree or an interest in science can set you up for a career in the pharmaceutical industry. I would recommend for the very basic sciences, because you can always build on that, like chemistry, biology, physics, biotechnology, and if you have a solid education in this, then the actual skills that you need for the job, this is often something that you then also learn on the job through active mentorship by the company, through participating in additional education programs, or even by participating and meeting people at a panel like this one here.
Excellent. And can you quickly mention some of the non-scientific occupations in your company?
Yes, so the non-scientific occupations are usually around the quality and the regulatory aspects. So here often good writing skills are important, because in order to be able to produce a pharmaceutical, often very lengthy documents have to be prepared, which are then, for instance, reviewed by the FDA, as we've heard in the news, that the FDA approves of and has certain timelines and a lot of work to approve pharmaceuticals. So excellent writing skills, for instance, is something which could set you up for a job in the quality or regulatory field.
Great points. And also, point out, we've got HR departments, you've got accounting departments, you've got sales departments, although they probably have to have some scientific background, purchasing. So there are many, many aspects to a business like yours. And I'm sure on a smaller, on a same scale for Crest and for the hospital. So those are other fields that we want to make sure people understand are available. So thank you. Okay, so let's now go into your personal, and I'm going to just keep you on there, Chris, while you're there. Your personal career pathway, how you came to where you are now. Was there any importance or role of a mentor, finding mentors, and any organizations that you felt were specifically helpful that you may know of at this point?
Mm-hmm. Yes, so my mentors throughout my careers have usually been my teachers, starting in high school, who got me excited about chemistry and studying chemistry. So I think that many of us can relate to this. Then also throughout university, many of my professors were the ones who also then shaped me in my interest in a particular field. In my case, this was organic and biochemistry, so it's a specialized field in chemistry. So I think teachers are the best mentors. When it comes to networks and to organizations to join, I think nowadays the best organizations are actually those informal ones, the former high school students or former people who we went to college to, because it's such a diverse field. We find that people who we crossed ways in the path end up in an interesting field and can open up an opportunity. So my recommendation is not actually for individual organizations, but to stay in contact with the people with whom you studied in the past, with whom you worked in the past, and talk to them regularly. And this is often the best way to learn about new career opportunities and different career opportunities.
Thank you. Thank you. Edward, can you tell us a little bit of, you gave us a little bit of your background, but how about your career pathway? Did you always want to do what you're doing now? I know you started out in nursing, you mentioned that. And if you could talk about some of the other aspects that might include folks that are in the telehealth area, how people get into that as well, but start with your personal pathway and any suggestions you have for mentoring organizations would be great.
Sure, yeah. So I actually grew up, in the area, locally, South Bay, the North Torrance, El Camino Village area. I played basketball over at Baggio Park, sports arena around there. So sort of grew up in this area and went to school locally as well too, and started in community college setting as well over at Camino. So that was sort of where my grounding took place. And I agree with Dr. Martin, just your instructors, your teachers kind of growing up is really helpful. I actually did a program similar to this in high school where I got introduced to people in different fields. And honestly, that's what kind of propelled me. I was, thinking pre-medicine, going into med school, because that's really all I knew about. I loved science and I loved health and the human body. So I thought, med school was kind of my opportunity. Obviously, my life, there's things going on in my life at that time where just 10 years of school and med school was maybe not the best choice for me personally. It could be for a lot of people. Fortunately, I bumped into a nurse, and a nurse at a hospital told me about the work they do, and sort of it spoke to me very, very deeply about the caring for patients and connecting the science to being able to care for somebody, deliver care directly. So that spoke to me volumes, and being able to see that in real life and see what a nurse does and how their life sort of unfolded and what kind of school they went to helped me realize, okay, this is something I actually can do. And like I said, being able to start in small local programs at community college level, get an entry-level degree and get into the field pretty quickly, really helped me propel my career and to go on. So, now I do different programs in the hospital. I also teach at a university and at the hospital here. And so I was like teaching as well too. So being able to combine healthcare, nursing, and teaching all together has sort of been a blessing for me. But yeah, just I think being part of the program like you are right now and getting to speak to people who are actually in the field probably is a huge step. I think most kids don't, most young people don't have that opportunity. And if you just get to meet people in the field and see what they do and how they did it, gives you some imagination of what you can do as well too. Like I said, I didn't think nursing was even a career option or possible, but I knew I liked healthcare and I knew I liked science. And so this sort of evolved and sort of grew along with it after I saw people do it. And again, yeah, I think programs like this that you're in and being close to some of the instructors you probably come across with, they have a wealth of knowledge and experience in the field. So tapping into them is probably a good idea.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And Chris Sprucer, can you tell us a little bit about your background? And the same questions to you about mentoring, networking, et cetera. And I have to say that Chris and some of his colleagues are incredible mentors themselves, along with Chris Martin.
Absolutely. So I'm in terms of finding my path, I'm probably not a standard example because I knew as a 6-year-old that I was going to be a scientist, and I pretty much followed that direction my entire life. But what I can tell you is that life is random. Life is so random, and you start out in a specific direction, and you meet people, and those random interactions with people change your life. They change your direction. They change the trajectory. So the best advice that I can give you is your network is as important as your technical skills and abilities. So challenge yourselves and go out there. It's uncomfortable in the beginning, particularly if you're an introvert like I am. It's very uncomfortable to meet people, and particularly people who are so far ahead of you. You think you can't possibly talk to this person, but you actually can. Most people will happily help you if you just ask. And that's really the thing. Go out there and ask. And sometimes you will get rejected, but I would say most of the time people will be glad to help you because you're students, you're young, and you need the help, and you will get it if you ask for it. And in terms of career paths, I mean, Chris Martin said it very well. In science, in STEM in general, whatever your field is, it's endless. There's so many jobs that are directly science related, and there's all those other jobs that are science adjacent. There is communication, again, regulatory affairs, and on and on and on and on. It's absolutely endless. I couldn't list all of them. I still discover new job types when I talk to people. So again, figure out what drives you, what motivates you, what you're interested in, and find people who are doing the job that you think would be the right thing for you to do, and talk to them, because you might actually find out that the impression you have of a specific profession is not at all what those people do on a day-to-day basis. So again, just challenge yourself and talk to as many people as you can. Mentors are essential in all of this. You'll be surprised.
Yeah, no, it's great advice. And as I mentioned that, I think I cut myself off. We have two great mentors already in the Chris and Chris in front of us. And Edward and his team that's on today, we're coming to you too, believe me, because we are getting more involved in the healthcare end as well. So thank you. I love the endless opportunities. I love the term science adjacent. That's really kind of cool. We learned some science adjacent both today as well as last week when we talked space and architecture. So in lab space, real estate. So yeah, lots of good things. We have a question. I don't know if any of you can answer it. I'm going to open it first to our panel and then to the audience. Renee Mitchell is saying that I have a major in vet tech and a vet assistant. How do I become one? Are any of the three of you at all familiar with that area? I'll make that an open question. If you know, okay.
So unfortunately, I can't answer that question at all, but I can hijack the question just to mention that obviously there are also pharmaceuticals made for animals. So for instance, we don't only manufacture pharmaceuticals and develop pharmaceuticals for humans, but also for horses and for pigs. So this could be an area which can also be of interest to a vet, because obviously animals need drugs too.
Excellent segue. Great. Is there anyone in the audience that can add some more light to Renee's question? Feel free to unmute yourself if you do. I'll just wait a second. No? Okay. So that kind of wraps up. If there are there any questions in general from our audience? This is open time. If you have a question, please, feel free to post it, or if you would, you can just raise your hand. Let's see. Okay, we have a comment from Leslie Sun. Want to say thanks. This is wonderful. I'm a colleague of Ed's. Thank you for being here. And made a career switch from biotech to nursing. So as a STEM kid at heart, I wish I had access to something like this as a teenager. Jacqueline, what were a few of your hardships? What were a few of your hardships that you faced when it came to finishing to pursue your career? Or maybe along the way even. Why don't we start with Edward? Any hardships that you faced?
I would say it's kind of daunting at first. Like I said, I was kind of sort of pre-med going to the whole med school route, and just the amount of schooling and tuition was really daunting, and it turned me off actually to that pathway. Fortunately, I said I stumbled upon different aspects of healthcare, like nursing and all the technology fields in nursing, in healthcare, that helped me find a pathway. But sometimes that could be just a simple roadblock, where just money and time in school could be a really barrier for certain people. So as many of my colleagues said, there's so many different fields, so not close yourself out to maybe you had this only one idea of what this one, position does, that if you look into that field, that there's probably tons of different career opportunities. So don't sort of get discouraged or lost in that. For me, it was really important to get into an entry-level position, to work in the field and be able to make money to pay for school. So nursing afforded me that opportunity. And so I really appreciate community colleges and technical vocational schools in the area that are affordable enough to give you a degree and some qualifications to be able to work. So I recommend, that was kind of my path.
Great point. Chris Buser, would you like to field that question? Hardships that you may have faced?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, hardships is a strong word, right? And we all have our challenges in life. And for me personally, I came into science as pretty much a purist. I thought that science is that abstract thing that everyone works with the same standards, with the same drive to the truth and all of that. And at one point I realized that while science as a concept is pure and straight, the people who do science are still human beings, and they come with all of their flaws, strengths and their flaws. So scientists are human beings too, and we all have our quirks and we make our mistakes. Definitely, a science career is a long grind, right? Particularly even if you're talking, I saw some of you want to go to med school. It's a long educational path, and it gets exhausting sometimes, but you just have to get through it, and you'll be fine at the other end.
Okay. Yeah, our other Chris, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I think one thing that probably Chris and Edward and my job share, and also our career pathways, is that there are certain times with a very high work intensity, so to speak. I can only imagine what it was like in January 21 from the scenes that Edward described. So this is something which has to be factored in, that there will be these periods of times where work will take up most of your awake hours, so to speak, and probably leave just a bit time to sleep and eat in between. Luckily, this is not most of the time, but you do have to quite often put in the hours, which can also take a toll on families and relationships and so on.
Yeah, good points. Good points. You've really given a good perspective to that question. I have two more questions, so let's try to pace ourselves here. Can you please tell us what the similarity between biomedical lab, and I think we're talking about careers, and biotech fields? If someone is studying medical lab for a job that has to do with medical laboratory work, could they also get accepted for a job in biotech? So I think what we're really saying here is, what's the difference? Where does biotech begin and end in terms of medical laboratory fields? And I'm thinking maybe, Chris Buser, should we start with you on that one? Sure,
absolutely. So it's fluid. There's people use the terms differently. There's a huge overlap between those fields. Biotech can pretty much be anything in the bio field these days. So the point being that at the end of the day, with such a degree and such a training, the most important part is your ability to analyze problems, complicated problems, and find solutions, and operate advanced equipment. That is essentially your skill set, and that can be applied anywhere in the entire field of the bio, life sciences, medical technology. Typically, when people say medical lab, they mean more diagnostic labs and things like that, where it's really healthcare associated in a hospital or again in a testing lab or something like that. But again, it's a very, very similar skill set. So I wouldn't worry about the distinction. It's easy to switch back and forth.
Good point. Would anybody like to add to that? I know we have some teachers on this program today, but Chris Martin, would you like to add to that?
Yes, I just wanted to also point out that right now the biotech, especially the job market, is such what we call a hot job market, that if you have a degree in medical lab, you have very good opportunities right now if you're interested in the biotech industry. So it's definitely worth getting the applications in or reaching out to people in the biotech field with if you have a medical lab background.
Right. And I can also add that a lot of our community colleges that are starting or expanding their biotech programs, like Compton with Catherine Marsh's, Cerritos, West LA, El Camino, et cetera, they have initial 101 courses that are really going through a lot of the career ends. So, you may want to take a look at that, or just Wikipedia. I have one more question, and this.
Before you go further, I want to add one thing. There are specialized credentials as well, right? So particularly if you're in a clinical, there's the clinical lab technician, which is a specialized credential that really focuses on clinical lab jobs. So there is a lot of overlap, but there are still some specialties within that.
Very good point. Thank you. Okay, Sahil has a question that may be geared towards Edward, but it could be anybody. What advice do you have for someone who is an immigrant and a non-traditional student who wants to get into medicine? I am currently doing my prerequisites from a community college. Any advice would be helpful. Who would like to take that? It was directed to you, Edward, first. So you want to start there? You probably know many people that are of immigrant status. Whether they, why don't you take it from there?
Yeah, sure. I'll say a few words, but I'm sure my colleagues can also chime in. First of all, I think you're doing a smart thing by starting with the community college. If you still are trying to get into the field or understand where your career path may be, spending time at community college, not spending a lot of money, but also getting an idea of different classes and courses you could take and entry level sort of positions. But also a lot of the instructors at community colleges, they're there because they love to teach and they love the field. So as my colleagues had pointed out, tap into that. And Dr. Booster also mentioned, just stick with it. It is a long journey. And like I said, for me, it didn't work out and I was able to find a pathway. But if medicine is your career goal and that's what you want to do, yeah, it's going to be a long road, but just stick with it. One class at a time, one semester at a time, get into one program at a time. And sooner or later, you'll realize you've accomplished your dream. It's totally doable. We can also chat offline if you want to. You could always send my email to these students, and they can always come chat with me, and I can connect them with someone. But and Dr. Martin, Dr. Brewster mentioned finding a mentor, finding someone who's in the field and is doing what you think you want to do. If you can meet with them and talk to them about their pathway, I think that'll really help you understand how to kind of sort of get there.
Right. Would anybody else like to add to that? Either one of you? No? Okay.
Yeah, I will. I do a lot of research with people in the medical field. And my first question, I get a lot of students who say they wanna be in medicine. And my first question is why? And the second question is, have you ever watched a surgeon, a doctor do their job and what they actually do day in, day out? A lot of you have an idea of how that looks like, again, maybe from the TV shows. And it turns out that reality very often is very, very different from what you think it is. So before you embark on such a long career path, make sure that you find out if you actually like what those people are doing. Again, try and I'm happy to connect you with MDs who are going to talk to you as well. Find out what they actually do on a day in, day out basis. I get a lot of, I want to be a neurosurgeon from students. And I know a bunch of neurosurgeons, and it's very different from what you think it is. So inform yourself before you embark on a long career, and then halfway through a program, you find out that actually you don't like where that career trajectory ends. Having said that, if that's what you want to do, stick with it. It's just a grind. You have to get through it. People before you have gone through it and have made it, so it's totally feasible. You're going to be fine. But in any of those career paths, please make sure ahead of time that you know what you're getting yourself into.
Oh, great. We have great advice here. I think you've almost done this already, but I'm going to, as a wrap up, is there, for our three panelists, is there any final thought or one piece of advice that you'd like to leave with the students given that are early in their career journey? Any one piece of advice that you would like to add? And I'm going to let that be optional. Edward, you want to add something?
I think my colleagues also hit on it, but you know, you're so focused on a goal and you're working so hard to get there, but don't forget to enjoy the journey. This is some of the best times of your life, your youth, your young career, you're going to school, meeting sorts of different people, the relationships, the sort of growing and learning. Enjoy that part, because you're focused on trying to get to an end point. And if that end point comes, great. If it doesn't, you know, at least you've had that journey to be part of your life. So just enjoy the journey. And,
great advice. Chris Martin, would you like to add any final thought for our early career folks?
Yeah, more of a repetition of what I said earlier. If you are in the science field, it doesn't really matter exactly on which subject you choose directly. As Edward said, as long as you have fun what you do. The science and discovery fields, they are so multidisciplinary that if you stick with what you like, you're very likely going to end up in an exciting position in future.
Yeah, there's great things happening in our ecosystem. How about you, Chris Busser? Any final word for our early career folks?
Also a repetition: meet people, meet people, meet people. Challenge yourself to meet as many people as you possibly can.
And I'd like to add to that, you know, with COVID, you know, we've all had to swerve and do things, and Zoom has become our best and worst enemy. But I have to say that I met all three of these folks initially because of virtual situations, on webinars, through other contacts. So it can start virtually, but then you want to make it in person. And fortunately, I've had the opportunity to meet 2 of 3 of these folks in person. So you can start either way. I would like to close with number 1, make sure that the students that are in our cohort stay on to talk with Donovan. And most of all, on behalf of all nearly 40 people that are on this call, thank you so much for the 3 of you, for your expertise, for your guidance, for your willingness to be with us, for your just the heartfelt passion that you have, not only for what you do, but for what you think our audience could be doing now and in their future. So thank you very much. We will be sending out the link to the recording when it's ready. We'll be sending out again the folks' email address if they're willing to let that be out there, which I see we're already getting some of that, as well as there are a couple of links that I know Edward has sent us to share with you. But anybody that's been on this call today will get that information. Thank you very much. Have a great rest of the week and weekend. And certainly our students in the cohort, please stay on. Everyone else, thank you so much for being with us, and especially our panelists. Thank you so much and take care.